The year was 1791 when Philip Ginter, a hunter by trade, came upon lumps of stone coal near Summit Hill. During the decades to follow, tons upon tons of the commodity known as black diamonds were mined in the Panther Valley and delivered to the waiting barges on the Lehigh River at the foot of Mauch Chunk. Beginning as a graded wagon road, the 9-mile stretch from Summit Hill to Mauch Chunk was converted to rail in 1827. Since the trip was all downhill, gravity was the primary source of power. Mules were used to pull the empty cars from the river back up to the mines on the same section of track. The rail system was designed and built to haul coal by two industrialists, Josiah White and Erskine Hazard. They rapidly became leading forces in the coal trade, supplying the nearby markets of New York and Philadelphia. Among other ventures, White and Hazard owned a wire mill where the means of burning hard coal was discovered, and were also instrumental in the design and construction of the Lehigh Canal. As the demand for coal grew, the combined skills of White and Hazard were subsequently called on to build a more elaborate railroad, one that could accommodate two-way traffic. In the 1840s, inclined planes were laid up the sides of Mount Pisgah and Mount Jefferson. These, along with additional track, were all connected in an elongated figure 8, forming a continuous 18-mile loop between the coal mines and the Lehigh River. This allowed empty cars to travel back up to the mines while loaded cars were heading toward the river. Even more impressive than this magnificent engineering feat was the fact that the railroad still used gravity as its primary source of power. It was not long thereafter that people discovered the railroad as a unique and exciting mode of transportation. Coal was still being moved by morning, but the afternoons on the Switchback were reserved for passengers. Locals found this a most enjoyable means of commuting between Mauch Chunk and Summit Hill. The entire 18-mile journey took 1 hour and 20 minutes. Passengers boarded at the Mauch Chunk depot. From there, cars were pushed up the Mount Pisgah plain by Barneys or safety cars. Of interesting note, the Barney cars did not supply the actual pushing power. This was done by means of stationary steam engines atop Mount Pisgah and Mount Jefferson. The Barneys, connected to bands of Swedish steel, were drawn upwards like cable cars. At the top of Mount Pisgah, 1,500 feet above sea level, the cars passed through the engine house. Once again, gravity took over. The cars traveled across the Mount Pisgah trestle, affording a spectacular bird's-eye view of the surrounding countryside. Traveling on past the Hackleburny mine, cars proceeded across the mountain to the 5-mile tree, where the down track was crossed, and then continued into Bloomingdale. Here, Barney cars were poised to provide another lift to the top of Mount Jefferson. At the crest of Mount Jefferson, gravity again came into play for a 1-mile run into Summit Hill. At the Summit Hill depot, passengers were free to roam the town before boarding for the return trip. The homeward leg took place on the down track, the original route of the coal trains. This featured a 2.5-mile highball on the homestretch at speeds in excess of 50 miles per hour. Many called it the most wonderful 18-mile ride upon the continent, and much of the Switchback's majesty has been preserved in pictures and memorabilia. Quotes taken from postcards express the excitement people felt about a ride on the Switchback. I'm having the time of my life. We're doing the Switchback today. It is a grand ride. We go up this mountain on our way home from the Flagstaff. It sure is beautiful up here. It's likely it'll be the closest to heaven you'll ever be. I'm on a delightful 1-day trip to the Switzerland of America. Talk about your hair-raising trolley rides. Was up on a mountain 1,500 feet above sea level. Rode on the Switchback roller coaster. This is 100% worse than the Jackrabbit at Carsonia. Scarier, more thrilling, more exciting. By the mid-1870s, larger railroads had penetrated the region and gained access to the valuable coal fields. There was no longer a need to transport coal on the Switchback. At that point, it became exclusively a passenger railroad. Ultimately, America's first tourist railroad. Regular excursions were scheduled from New York and Philadelphia to accommodate those desiring a ride on the Switchback. Along with the more typical passengers, noted dignitaries of the day visited the Switchback, Thomas Edison for one. When asked whether the engine houses should be converted from steam to electricity, he remarked, "The operation should be left exactly as it is." During the late 1800s, the Switchback's popularity continued to skyrocket. Taking a ride aboard the Gravity Railroad became a national phenomenon. At its high point, 75,000 passengers were riding the railroad each year. Tickets went for $1 per ride, 75 cents for group excursions. The cars left as often as once every 6 minutes on holidays and special occasions. Incredibly, by the turn of the century, tourism was competing with coal as the area's leading revenue producer. Just how big had the attraction become? One need look no further than Niagara Falls, the only tourist attraction in the United States that drew more people each year than the Switchback. In its prime, a ride on the Switchback meant going in grand style. But even the most wonderful 18-mile ride upon the continent was not impervious to the winds of change. Through the 1920s, ridership began falling off significantly. Local road construction and the advent of the automobile hastened the railroad's decline. Ultimately, the Great Depression drove home the final unyielding spike.